going to get going. So thank you for all coming. I know some people are going to wander in, but I want to be able to keep this going and on time for those that got here when they're supposed to. I'm Tom Tarkowitz. I'm the city manager for those who don't know me. One thing I'm going to just start off, if you're thinking of speaking, if you could take one of these cards, maybe Ed and Cheryl, would you be willing to? Also, if you want to get on our mailing list, we have a list that's set up from past meetings, but we'd like to, if you want your name, address, or phone or email number, whatever way you'd like to be communicated with. But if you're planning on speaking, when you come up, that way we'll get correct spelling and get you down correctly. With Tarkowitz, I always say common spelling, and so it's real simple. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to have a presentation by Stantec about their study, and then what we're going to do after they're done, then we'll take questions at that time. We're not going to take questions as they're presenting. And what we're going to need to do is we are recording this for those people who can't be here. We're going to put this out on our website. It'll probably be through YouTube. Also, we have some council members who could not make it tonight. So this is the main reason we want to get this out. Your questions and comments, the presentation, and then when the council deals with this, at least they'll have a good feeling, and then they can go back and review this. Trying to think of anything else. Oh, just housekeeping. If you need restrooms, they're right across the hall through this door. Also, emergency exit. Some of you came up the stairs. There's an exit right here also that if you need to leave or there's an emergency. Hopefully everybody can hear with the sound equipment we brought in, and thank you, Tom Widley, who's helping us with this. So we'll start with there. At this, Ed, do you want to say anything?
I would like to.
Okay. We've got some staff members here, and I'll introduce them, and then Cheryl Vosberg is our environmental coordinator. Ed Rice is the electric utility director. Kristen Bauer, there she is back there. She's the public services director. And we've all been working on this project together. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and then he'll introduce the Stantec folks that are here. We'll go through the presentation, and then we'll get up. But if you need pencils, or we've got pencils up here too. And if you have any written statements that you'd like to turn in, I've got one up here already that we can get that to the council also for their deliberation. So I'll have Ed come up next then.
Thanks, Tom, and also welcome everybody for showing up for this important process that we're going through as it concerns the Marshall Hydroelectric Dam Facility. I'll just go use a few minutes here because really the intent of this meeting is to hear from Stantec. I just want to reiterate that the intent of tonight's forum is to provide information to you and to answer questions. There's been absolutely no decision made as to the status of the dam. We're still gathering information and gathering input from people such as you so the city council can make the best informed decision down the road on what the process is going to be. A little bit of how we got to where we are. I think most of you have probably heard this before, but the dam was constructed in 1882. So for almost 140 years, 135 years, it's really been a sediment catching spot. The dam's been there, and there's been a lot of sediment that's washed down river and is collected out in this area. And the dam is also, it's regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we're under their jurisdiction, and they're quite strict on what they expect of all dams throughout the United States. There've been a lot of accidents over the years, and when they write a request for action or whatever, we pay attention to it. And that's what's happened in 2012. The FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, not requested, but mandated that we do what we call a full inspection of the facility, of the dam facility, a safety inspection. And as a result of that inspection, there was found several deficiencies in the dam that's that was written back or supplied to the, and we had an independent a consultant do it. It wasn't done internal to the city. It was an independent consultant that did the inspection, and quite a lengthy process. And that was sent to FERC, and it just kind of laid on their desk for about 3 years, well, till 2015. And then in 2015, they said, okay, no, we want to see a schedule and a plan on what you're going to do to fix this. You know, after 3 years of waiting, but that's the way the process works. So we did, based on the information we had at the time, we did respond to them and put together a plan for them, and they accepted that plan. But then, as we got further into it, then we started talking to the state people, the DEQ and the DNR, on, you know, what should we be doing here in the county, or the county conservation district, and what's the best way to approach this? What will you let us do? How will you let us lower the impoundment water? And they said, well, we would really like to see you take some samples upstream of the sediment, more than what we had in the past, because the FERC requirement is only to grab just what they call grab samples, just a little bit of sediment off the bottom of the river and analyze it clean. But once the samples were taken down to the bottom of the river through the silt, there was some old, I guess, legacy issues with the bottom layers of silt. And it caused us then we went back to the commission, or the council, excuse me, and they said, well, we got to have a lot more information. So at that point, it got really beyond the skill level of the city, and we decided to hire Stantec Consulting Engineering Services, who was really a nationally renowned expert in dam remediation and dam removal processes. So they've been working on this since, let's see, about November of 2016. So it's been a period of time now. And a lot of things have changed even as they've went through their analysis. And our major request to them in their contract was to study 3 basic options. 2 of them had to do with just fixing the dam, fixing the condition that was discovered in 2012, and keeping the dam as is. And those the differences there was, one was to lower the pond and fix it, lower the impoundment and fix it. And the second one was to try to fix it and build some kind of temporary dam and hold the impoundment as it is today. And then the third option was for full, removal. Just wanted to study it as long as we were, in that process to see what it turned out. And with that, so Stantec, come up with a report, and again, it was kind of it's a high level, what I call an engineering conceptual report on the facts that are known today. I know there's a lot more details that has to be worked out as we go forward, but we were pretty pleased with what they did for us, for what the requirements were in their contract. So, with that, we got Paul Maloka here with Stantec and Cody Fleece, and they're going to present hope I didn't step on your toes too much in this introduction. Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stantec.
Thank you, Ed and Tom. My name is Paul Maloka from Stantec, the project manager for the disposition study, and I'm here with my colleague Cody Fleece, and we're going to go through the results of our study and hopefully come out better understanding what it is we were trying to do here and what we accomplished. I guess I have to turn this on. Here we go. Okay, so the agenda for the evening, we're going to go over existing conditions of the dam. Why is it, get into some more detail about why it is we were asked to do this study to begin with. Talk about the different alternatives and the cost of the alternatives, and then different funding opportunities that we looked at for this. So the existing conditions, I think in a nutshell, the dam has structural and hydraulic issues that have to be addressed. And as Ed mentioned, these are mandated by FERC, but also by good engineering practice that you need to do this. On the structural side, we have what you call internal erosion and piping going on in the island embankment. And the island embankment is the center embankment between Perrin 1 and Perrin 2 spillways. And erosion and piping, what that means is that the water there, every earthen embankment seeps water. It's part of the nature of an earthen embankment. And the idea is that you want the water to seep out in a controlled manner. And what's happening now at island embankment is it's seeping out in kind of an uncontrolled manner. And so that, what that does is it increases the risk of that embankment having a structural issue, distress condition, or even possibly a failure. You're not at that stage now, but it's just that these signs are things that indicate you could have a problem in the future. And I know the city is monitoring the seepage, which is what is done in situations like this, but really the answer is to fix it. And the other part of this is that the stability factor is low, and what that means is that the safety factor is less than what it should be. Again, the dam is stable, but these are designed to have a stability that is several times more than is the minimum required. And this dam has a safety factor that has less cushion, if you will, than is commonly accepted today as the standard. So it has less extra give in there, if you will, to allow for situations. Hydraulically, the dam has inadequate discharge capacity at the maximum flood. And what this means is that during your maximum flood situations, the pond elevation is going to rise, and before you hit your spillway capacity, the capacity that you're required to spill by law, the water will start running over top of the embankments. And that's always a dangerous situation with an embankment. I think everybody knows about the Oroville situation. The principal spillway started falling apart, the big concrete chute, and then they started sending water over the secondary spillway, and they were afraid to send too much water over that because the secondary spillway is made to take additional water. It's not made to take the whole capacity of the dam, and they were starting to go that route. And the long and the short of it is that they had to slow that down because water running over the top of the dam starts to erode the dam away. And that's a very dangerous situation. So anyway, at your highest flood capacities, and I'm talking about getting in the range of the 100-year flood, which probably nobody has seen. I don't know that you've had a 100-year flood at this dam in the last 50, 60, 70 years. I don't believe you have, actually. This graphic is just a map of the existing conditions. The main focus here, again, has been this island embankment. So here's the embankment, and this is a masonry wall that's built into the embankment. This island embankment was constructed to serve as a railroad embankment. And it's obvious to see by looking at these piers that are in the river still to this day, right? You can see them from Marshall Road, and those are all part of this same railroad system that used to be over this. So that masonry wall remains to this day. Another feature here that we'll talk about that's important is this 12-inch water main that you've got running through here. This is being looked at by the city to be moved. When we wrote the study, it was still early in the planning phases of that. So we've assumed that this is going to stay in place for our written study. But the fact is that this water main is a risk factor inside the dam. And mostly during construction, which we'll talk about in a moment here. This here is your principal spillway, Perrin 2, where the water spills unless the water level starts to rise. And I'm not sure what flood frequency it is that you start to spill over Perrin number 1, but when it starts to rise enough, then you'll start to move some water over this spillway. But typically that pond level sits right about at that edge. Okay. And here's a photograph of the island embankment. And again, you can see how rough it is and so forth. And let me just jump back and show you one more thing that I want to talk about in a minute here. But with regard to spillway capacity, this embankment is slightly low, but really these ones here, which we call the Park Embankment and the West Embankment, these are low, so that if you start to approach the 100-year flood elevation, this is where you're going to see the spilling happen first, is over this one and this one. Okay. So again, the island embankment, this is looking from Perrin 2 toward Perrin 1 toward the upstream. And here you can see the masonry wall inside of there, or I'm sorry, we're looking toward the downstream. This one looks toward the upstream in the opposite direction. There's quite a few trees on the embankment, which generally is a no-no. We don't want trees on the embankment for a number of reasons, but really that's the least of the troubles on this embankment. It has more to do with the internal structure. You can see how uneven it is. And down here at the base of this wall is where the irregular seepage is happening in 2 or 3 spots down here. This graphic shows existing conditions with regard to the sediment. And this top plan view is the river. And right here at 0, 0 is where the dam is. And then working your way upstream, we have different stations, we call them, which marks how many river feet, river miles you're traveling upstream of the dam. And getting all the way to about 3 miles upstream, 16,000, 17,000 feet is what we consider to be the extent of the impoundment. This graph on the bottom is a profile of that same stretch that you're seeing above. And so what this does is imagine a line running through this river here, and then we take that and we stretch it out and we make a cut and we look in one direction. So we're looking toward the north here, through the center of the river in one direction. This top dark line is the existing water surface, and this bottom line is what we consider to be the natural river bed. This middle line is your sediment, and it's a pretty thick blanket of sediment, you'll see. Most of this data is based on data that was collected from the county. The county did a limited number of cross sections. We took those, Calhoun County took those, we took that information and integrated it in this, but Stantec also did a survey for the first few hundred feet upstream of the dam, and that represents this part way up here. And so you'll notice way at the very front, that top line disappears pretty much, and that's right there at the dam. This line here is Perrin 2. So downstream of Perrin 2, there's almost no sediment in the bottom. But upstream from there, it starts building up very quickly. And that's an important factor in the repair, one of the repair alternatives, and most importantly, the dam removal scenario that we're going to look at. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Cody, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the sediment management.
And so as Paul said, there were 6 cross sections that were collected in the impoundment upstream. I believe each one of those had at least 3 points on it, spreading across the reservoir. And so what we did is we took those and made a very rough, very cursory level estimate of what the total volume might be. And it looks to be that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.5 million cubic yards of sediment that are currently being stored in the impoundment. And if you look at this, you can see that there are some areas in the Thalweg where there's some pretty deep deposits. And just kind of keep this in your mind for just a second, and I'm going to show you some examples from some other projects that we've worked on. So the top one up here is West Milton Dam, which is on the Stillwater in Ohio. And the thing that you see about that is the dotted line, which shows the bottom, suggests that one's storing very little sediment. It just doesn't have much in the way of material that's being stored. This next one, the Ballville Dam on the Sandusky River, doesn't store very much towards the top, but there is a pretty good sediment wedge there This one has, we estimate, about 815,000 cubic yards. And it's kind of an intermediate example, if you will. The third example down here is another one on the Walhonding River, 6 Mile Dam. And this dam was actually built in 1830, so it's been there for a really, really long time. And it is pretty much full. And in fact, even the fine sediment has really been displaced from that one over time. And so we, based on the limited amount of data that we have, we would probably place your dam somewhere in between these two. So it's got a lot, but it's maybe not quite as full as this one. And then this is just another way to look at the same data. So I mentioned that we have samples that were collected along the length of the impoundment, but they're also collected perpendicular to the direction of flow. So each one of these little points here represents the location of a coring. So there's one there, one there, one there, and then this one has 4. And so what you can see, this is top of sediment. The green line is top of water, and then this is the native riverbed. And so you can see that in some cases, there are 8, 9 feet of sediment, some really pretty thick deposits. And this becomes really important for both the repair with drawdown and the dam removal alternative, because this material has to be managed in a way that does not bring about adverse impacts to downstream aquatic resources. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And one of the things that you can see here is that the purple lines are actually some concept diagrams for dredging that might be needed in order to try to control the export of that material to downstream ecosystems. And we can talk about that in a little more detail later, but I just wanted to show you those right now. So in addition to volume, so the volume of material is really important, but also the chemical composition of that material is important. And so what these points represent are data points where sediment was collected, and then the sediment was sent off to a laboratory and analyzed for its chemical constituents. And so we had data from the Calhoun County Conservation District, but also these ones with the big long numbers were data that were collected as part of the Marshall Spill, the Enbridge project. And so we were using both of those to try to get a picture of what those sediments were like. So now, this is a pretty complicated, complex issue, and I think it's important to know that there are all kinds of standards, and really, at this point in time, we're looking at screening criteria. And what we do with those is we take the results of the chemical analysis and we compare them to published data that describe what potential effects might be to ecosystems or for drinking water impacts. There are standards for what kind of concentrations are safe to come in contact, so skin contact. If you were out walking or touching the sediment, what would be safe levels? And in general, the ones that are designed for human protection, strangely enough, tend to be somewhat higher than the ones that are protective of aquatic ecosystems. And so I'm going to talk about those in a little bit more detail. And really for this project, we use 2 standards that are out there in the published review. It's folks who are scientists who are doing a lot of work with different organisms, looking at trying to establish where you begin to see adverse effects. And so the first of these standards that we use is something called a threshold effect concentration. And that's just kind of a fancy way to say if it's below this particular concentration, then you're unlikely to have any kind of effect on an aquatic ecosystem. And it's based on numerous studies of multiple organisms all over North America. The second level that we were using, a second standard we were using on this was something that's called a probable effect concentration. And that's just a fancy way to say, if it's above this, then you're more likely to have an effect than not. Now, it's still kind of a conservative standard in that, you know, we're still just at a screening level. We're just looking at numbers. We're not really testing. We're not really doing bench scale tests on live animals or those kinds of things. So it's, again, it's a screening level, and it says there's something here that you probably need to be concerned about and that you need to dig into in a little more detail. So now let's talk about what the results mean, now that we've talked a little bit about the standards. So PCBs really were not detected, which is really good, because that's a bioaccumulative pollutant and is common, especially around power plants and that kind of thing. Completely clean for that. Metals exceeded both TECs and PECs at multiple locations along the length of the impoundment, from way down by the dam all the way up to the top. Same thing for PAHs, which are really kind of petroleum constituents, so things that you would find in oils, gases, those kinds of things. Exceeded both TECs, and most samples exceeded PECs. So again, the probable effect concentrations. Arsenic and cadmium have exceeded concentrations for drinking water protection criteria. And so what that would mean is you'd be concerned about that perhaps if someone had a well that was right there. Also, arsenic and benzoapyrene exceeded direct contact criteria. So what that means is, skin contact. So there are a lot of chemical constituents in these sediments. Now, as I said, these are screening thresholds, and more work needs to be done to really understand what this means later on. And when I say that, it can mean there can be differences vertically. So perhaps maybe more sediment that is contaminated is at the bottom. Could be a very thin band of material. Could be that it's distributed in patches laterally. Could be, we see it pretty much longitudinally along the full length. But the point is that there's still investigation that needs to be done to really understand what that is, or the extent of the contamination and what it really means for downstream ecosystems, for human health, and those kinds of things. Another important thing is, as of yet, these data have not been, the sediment in this impoundment, especially at the lower strata, have not been exposed to test organisms. A common way to assess the impacts of this material is to actually expose it to fish or invertebrates, and then see how those organisms do over time, and to see how well they survive, if there are effects, if there are not. And that's something that is probably going to need to be done to get a better understanding of the situation in this impoundment. So the important thing here is, at this point in time, there are pollutants that are present. We don't know. We have to work through some different decision trees to try to figure out what the appropriate thing is to do going forward. And it's important because two of the options that are under consideration would potentially result in some release of sediment to downstream environments. And we're not certain yet whether that material is safe for release to downstream environments, or whether it needs to be hauled to a landfill, whether it can be left on site, cap and close. And so there are a whole bunch of engineering options that are still on the table, and the results of future testing are going to help us understand, are we able to simply use a cofferdam and control the sediments, or do we need to do hydraulic dredging? Are we able to draw the impoundment down and try to get after the material in the dry? Can we redistribute the material out on the floodplains? And so additional testing is going to help us get to those numbers and to those decisions. Another important thing that was that we looked at as part of the analysis is the historic character of the dam. And so that's another factor that's going to have to be considered going forward. As Ed said earlier, it's an old dam. I believe it is actually on the National Historic Register, third oldest continuously operating facility. And so what that means is that there's probably going to be, no matter what the option is, if it's repair, if it's removal, there's going to have to be some work done there in terms of to satisfy the National Historic Preservation Act. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Paul.
Ed mentioned these, and we'll get into some more detail at this time. The three alternatives that we looked at: repair with the cofferdam. That is a barrier that prevents the water from getting into the areas where you want to work. Temporary barrier. Repair with drawing down. So we would lower the pond, the entire pond level temporarily, and then make the repairs and then put the pond back where it was. And then the final one is removal of the dam itself. So repair with cofferdam. As you recall, one of the main focus of the issues is this island embankment here. So I'll go through the repairs that we're making first, and then we'll talk about the different methods of making the repairs, because all the repairs are the same, whether we're using a cofferdam or drawing the pond down. So I'll explain all those repairs that we're talking about, and then we'll launch into discussing the methods. So on the island embankment, you may perceive here that this is quite a bit wider than the original one that we had in the existing conditions. And that's the case for two reasons. Number one, we're increasing the height of the embankment in order to prevent water from flowing over it during high flow times. And therefore, by increasing the height, the width increases even if you had the same slopes. But we're also flattening the downslope here. So that makes it wider between the two of those things. In order to make this happen, the first step is to remove the bad soil from the embankment and demolish that masonry wall and any other sort of called garbage is in the wall. We're estimating about between 4 and 6 feet of material would have to be removed. Then engineered fill is put back, and as part of that we will include a internal drainage system that collects the water and directs it to pipes and sends it out away from the embankment in a manner that would not allow soil particles to also move. So the idea is that you let the water move through, collect the water, but you make the soil stay where it belongs, namely in the dam. You're not letting soil particles find their way out and cause a potential problem. The issues with the overtopping, as I noted, are focused mostly on the park embankment and the west embankment. On the west embankment, to address that, we're raising the wall height. There's already a concrete wall here next to the head race of the powerhouse. So I think raising that a foot or two would be enough to prevent water from spilling over this during your high flows and running around over that embankment like we don't want to happen. However, here on the park side, we felt it was the best thing just to add earth grade. We could do the same over here. We could add earth grade and solve the problem there, but here it seemed simpler just to use concrete those particular decisions would be made during the detailed design, but here you've got Marshall Road, and it would be less likely to interfere with that road. But here in the park, the simplest way really is just to add earth. Again, a foot or two, I think, is all it's needed here to make this high enough so that you're not going to spill. And concomitant with that is we would be raising the retaining walls on both sides of both these spillways. Sometimes call them abutment walls, retaining walls, and those as well would be raised a couple, 3 feet in order to force the water to go over the concrete spillways and not let it go over the embankments. And similarly, here on the island embankment, we would be extending those walls further to the downstream because, as I noted, we are increasing the toe width of that embankment. So we would increase these wall widths down here a little bit. One of the things that goes along with widening the embankment is management of water around the base here when you have an event that lets the water spill over. As we noted, most of the time water is not spilling over this, and I'm sure you're all aware of this because you live here. Mostly the water pond just is right there at that edge. But when you do spill water, at least according to the grading information that we have, the water tends to run in this direction right up next to the toe of the dam. So especially since we are making this wider, we wanted to avoid a situation where you had running water next to this structure that really is what needs to be there to impound the water. So rather than trying to armor the toe, which is another way you could do it, but it's not preferred, the preferred way is to move the water further away. So in order to make that happen, we would add a little bit of earth fill up here near the toe of the dam. I'm talking in the range of probably 1 to 3 feet of dirt in that range, and cut a similar amount out here on this other side so that when the water spills, it's first going to start moving this way instead of up that way. And to make that happen, a couple things would need to be, this boardwalk would have to be removed and replaced with a pedestrian bridge, similar to what you have over on this end here. And then also as part of the detailed design, we'd do some hydraulic modeling study to make sure that the water was not, the changing flow pattern was not impacting any of these properties down here and causing a flood. I don't think it would, but it would be part of the due diligence of making a change like this. And also the MDEQ is interested in preserving wetlands as much as possible, so they would want us to have what we call compensating cuts. So the amount of earth that we fill in here would be cut so that you would have a net zero change of earth moving in here. Now let's talk about the cofferdam a little bit. So the cofferdam in this case is a tight sheeting cofferdam. It's what you call PZ sheeting or tight sheeting, and the sheets lock together and they're pounded into the earth. And they tow literally into the bedrock. And then braces are used off the back of this embankment here to horizontally stabilize and give strength to this cofferdam. And then you get rid of the water on this side, and that allows you to work on the embankment, and then this water here can stay right where it is. And if you recall, we discussed the water main, and that's a big issue here because, as noted, the sheet piling wants to be driven down into the ground, but you can't do that because you have a water main in this one location, or you can't do that in this location because you have a water main. So all these sheets out here could be driven in hard, but right here, a special adaptation would have to be made in order to get across this with the cofferdam. So this would add expense and, as I noted, risk, because if the water main was severed in some way during construction, it would be a big deal. for that. This cross-section here, these cross-sections on the next two slides we're going to be showing here are basically, if you imagine a cut that goes right through the dam this way, cutting this right down the middle and then looking down this way. So you're standing up here and you're looking through the embankment that way. So the water is on the left side, the pond's on the left here, and on the right side is the downslope of that embankment. Here's the cofferdam that you saw in the picture. Here's the earth we're removing, right? So you can see this slope is kind of rough and jagged. This is kind of a representational diagram here. It's not exact. It's more just it's illustrative. Here's the masonry wall. So all this has to be cut out. 4 to 6 feet was the estimate. And this material in the embankment, we have not done any studies on, but there's a good chance you may have some contamination in there. So it's not a huge quantity of earth we're talking about in this embankment compared to what would have to be dealt with in the impoundment. But it's enough that it would have to be dealt with, and the material would have to be hauled into probably what you call a type 2 landfill. But anyway, that would have to be determined during the design. It's just a potential cost on this project that has to have more investigation. Here is our reconstruction section. So you'll notice the top here is a little higher. Maybe you can't notice that well, but you can notice it's narrower, and that's because we're raising it up higher. And we're giving a softer slope on the downstream side. So this doesn't really show it well. This is a compressed view that you're looking at here. It's not in scale in the same direction, in both directions. But we're suggesting a 4-to-1 slope on it. I think the slope that's on it now is closer to 2.5-to-1, which is pretty steep. So 4-to-1 is 4 horizontal. Every 4 feet horizontal, you go down 1 foot vertical. And again, that's one of the principal reasons why the embankment ends up so much wider than it is now. Down here at the base, we're putting a tow drain, and this is where the water is collected. And above the tow drain is a weep drain, or call it chimney drain, which kind of runs up the side of the embankment and collects water as it moves through. It's a material that has a specified gradation so that it will collect water nicely, because the core of this dam will tend to be more of a cohesive clay type of a soil. So what you want is a granular, more open graded material that's going to let the water come into it. And then down here at the drain tile, which is moving in and out of the page, you would have probably even a larger size stone, and then you collect the water with a slotted PVC drain pipe or something of that sort, and then discharge it on both sides. And then all this would be granular fill, and at the front facing the pond, you would put a riprap or a heavier stone, which helps protect against wave action and so forth. Okay. So here is the same repair, and I'm not going to go through all the repairs again, but the difference here is that there is a cofferdam here, right across the river. And this is a different style of cofferdam than the one in the first slide. The first slide had a tight sheeting cofferdam that goes right around this embankment and only dewaters the embankment. This cofferdam is called a Portadam. It's the brand name. There may be other brands, other ones that make this, but this is a self-supporting structure that's kind of like a big teepee tent, and it literally uses like tent poles and then a canvas tarp over it to hold the water back. And what's kind of slick about this is that directs the loads of the water down into the river kind of more in a vertical way as opposed to the tight sheeting, which is a cantilever trying to bend. So this, basically the long and the short of it is that this allows you to span across this river without having a lot of additional horizontal bracing. Sheet piling doesn't do well in a situation like this if you have any sizable water difference in the head from the upstream to downstream. So sheet piling maybe would work in this situation, but as a sure alternative to make sure it would work is we suggested the Porta Dam. And the real advantage of this is that it allows you to completely avoid being on that water main. You can just avoid it. So you're upstream of the water main, you're going to draw this area down here, and then you can do all your work. The disadvantage of this is that it necessarily means that you have to elevate the pond level for a short time. So as noted earlier, and as you all are aware, the pond typically does not spill over this. It's riding right at that edge for the most part, or slightly below it. But if we did this, then we're blocking it off in this direction and we're forcing all the water to go over there. So the pond level goes up, we're talking inches, you know, not feet. Normally it'd be a few inches up. But still, this complicates the permit process because now the regulators are going to be a lot more interested in what's happening to the water here, and chances are we would have to do more hydraulic modeling and so forth to demonstrate that we're not causing a flood in somebody's yard. Okay. The other choice for repair is with a drawdown. And in this case, what we do is simply open up wide this, there's a, what you call a waste gate or a bypass gate in the powerhouse. Open up that gate and let the river water run through there and let that pond start to drain out. And so that water surface is going to go down and get down to a level here where you can work on this dam. Now, I mentioned that we need to take about 6 feet of earth off. Chances are you could get away by drawing the pond down maybe just 7 feet. So you don't need to draw it all the way down, but you're going to draw it down a pretty good amount. And that comes into play, and this is where this option starts to look. I guess just before I move on, the advantage here again is that this allows you to stay away from this water main. But the disadvantage is that the pond elevation normally is up here on the top black line. You can see that probably not so well. The red line is about where we would be drawing down the pond. And this cross section, the first cross section I showed you was for the entire river, 17,000 feet, 3 miles. This cross section is for only the first 15,000 feet, or I'm sorry, only the first 1,500 feet. So the bottom elevation, within 400 feet, you would be exposing bottom by drawing down only 6 or 7 feet. That's how much sediment you've got up there. And then there's a spot beyond 400 feet where the pond bottom starts to drop again. But then within 1,000 feet, 1,100 feet, by that point, you are completely exposing the sediment with only 6 feet of drawdown. So that means that from 1,100 feet all the way up to 17,000 feet, the bottom is exposed. So now what you've got is a situation where water is flowing over the surface of the water in a very low profile, and it's going to be moving faster, and it's going to start carrying sediments out of the pond. So suddenly we got to deal with the sediments with this alternative. So that complicates that alternative, and as you'll see when we get to the end, it drives up the cost quite a bit. So I'm going to hand it off to Cody, and we'll talk about dam removal.
So this is a plan form of the dam area without the dam. And you can see that in this alternative, we would route the channel back around through here. The dam across here would be drawn down incrementally. The rate that the pool can be drawn down is about 1/2 foot every 24 hours. And in part that is a sediment control measure, but the issue with that is that even at that low rate, with the amount of sediment that you have, there's still going to be export that would come out of the impoundment. And so one of the very first things that we did on this project is we convened a meeting with folks from various regulatory agencies who would have an interest in this dam removal project or in this particular option. And we said, all right, how do we handle sediment? You know, what is allowable, what is not in this case? And the answer really, as I said earlier, is that we need to get more information on the chemical makeup of this. But in that meeting, there was definitely concern that was expressed about both the impacts from a volume perspective and also from the chemical constituent perspective. And so in a lot of our projects, we're able to do removal without having to do any kind of sediment management at all. Even sometimes when there's a lot of sediment that's stored behind the dam, in some cases, people look at the stored sediment as a benefit in that it's trapped substrates that are helpful for fish spawning or for beach nourishment or other things. But in this case, it seemed that there was a real reticence to look at the sediment in that way. And so we were really forced to assume that we're allowed to export only minimal quantities from the impoundment. And so what that means, that really influences how you do the engineering for the project, right? If you're not allowed, if you have 1.5 million cubic yards and you're not allowed to export any of it, that's a pretty tall task to hand to someone, right? And so one of the things that we do in circumstances like this is we'll dredge a pilot channel. Because even with a really incremental drawdown of just a 1/2 foot every 24 hours, you're still going to start headward channel incision, which is just a fancy way to say that you're going to start washing the sediment out into the downstream areas, right? So if you want to control that, the first thing that we do as part of our projects is we'll dig a pilot channel up through the sediment, using the approximate dimensions of the channel as it will be, or as it is in a free-flowing reach. Now, as part of this, we looked at 2 different options in this. One is that we take that material, we take it up, we decant it, put it into like big sausages, drain the water off of it, take that material, haul it off to some kind of a confined disposal facility. All right? So you can imagine that by the time you have a bunch of hose running around, or you have a hydraulic dredge in the river and you move 100,000 cubic yards for a pilot channel, that gets to be pretty expensive, right? The other option that we looked at is we assume that the material is safe for direct contact, that it satisfies drinking water criteria, and so in that case, it's okay to leave that material in place. All right, so you still have the volume issue that you can't let it go downstream, but you don't have to haul it up and dewater it and do all that. You can just move the material around and leave it in place. So in total, in both of those scenarios, we're looking at moving somewhere around 600,000 cubic yards, 100,000 for the pilot channel, and then regrading the floodplains, revegetating them. Another thing that we do as part of this, because you really have to be careful about what we call headward channel incision. In this case, we assume that we would have to put in 3 grade control structures or constructed riffles to try to keep that material from cutting down and exporting more out, because the river is doing the work and pushing the material downstream. You know, the dam removal piece of this is actually fairly inexpensive and pretty straightforward, but it's really just the sediment piece that is complicated and expensive. Other things, you know, we might leave the abutment down here. We might take it out, but in this option, pretty much the whole thing is taken out. And so cost, you want to go back, Paul, or you want me to just run through this? Yeah. So, oops, did I skip over one of them? So the repair with the cofferdam worked out to be about 2.2 million. And again, these are concept estimates, right? So there's some error bars on these. The repair with drawdown works out to be about 22 million. And again, you know, depending on cost for quantities, that could go up. There's probably some up and down in that. Because the quantities are so large, you know, the unit prices can have a big effect, but again, it's probably not a huge effect. It might, maybe we'd knock this down to, I don't know, 15 million or so. The dam removal and, you know, sediment management opportunities turned out to be the most expensive because the most material is being handled, the most sediment. Again, you know, I think for the pilot channel, we were looking at quantities of somewhere around $100 a cubic yard to move that material. Even if you look at $70 a cubic yard, you know, we're probably still down in like the $30 million range, maybe more. And so it's important to note, though, that when we go through all this analysis, we had to assume this because this is really the guidance that we got. Now, it's entirely possible that we could do this next analysis and that it would be decided that this material is okay for export. If we get to that, then, you know, the dam removal project is fairly cheap. If we don't get to that, then this is probably more in line with where you are. I don't know if you want to grab this or.
Yeah, so thank you. The short story here, I think, is there's not a whole lot of funding available for repairing a dam. There's a lot of different opportunities available for taking out a dam. However, the funding for repairing a dam that is available is a much bigger proportion than the funding that's available for removal. And so, in other words, the potential funding, and this is from traditional sources. There could be other sources out there, but this is from traditional grant sources that you see often. You know, there could be certain local sources, but we haven't got those in here that are just unknown, that could come forward. But anyway, the Michigan Dam Management Grant Program does allow applying money to repair of a dam, and they will typically do about a 10% match. That fund has varied from $300,000 to around $3 million or so in the last so many years. I think the city of Flint took the entire fund last year, $3 million. But honestly, I haven't seen it $3 million, and this is the first time I've seen it that high in quite a few years. It's usually been down more in the 350 range for the whole state. So if you were able to capture $100,000 or $200,000 of that as a 10% match, you know, that would probably be reasonable for the $2.2 million alternative. However, I put the caveat on this particular grant that it depends on showing an economic benefit to having the dam. So you have to be able to demonstrate that in order to qualify for this dam, for this removal grant. These other grants, you know, range from several $100,000 to upwards of $5 million for removal. But again, they don't really put a very big dent in a project if it happens to be this level that we're thinking, $44 million to $98 million, $5 million bucks isn't going to do a whole lot for you. And it doesn't really even do a lot for the repair or drawdown. You know, that management grant doesn't do a whole lot for that one either. Really, I think it's the most significant for the cofferdam. And that's really the gist of it. Again, I think just want to emphasize that, you know, we've put together a report on the basis of the information we've had, and especially with the dam removal, there's been a lot of questions. I mean, there are more information moving forward could change things quite a bit, but we don't typically want to speculate too much until we can get some better guidance from the regulators. So I'm going to turn that over to Tom and entertain questions.
Okay. What we're going to do, because again, for those that came in late, I shouldn't say late, came in after I did my first announcements, we are videotaping this. It's going to be out on our website. It's going to be on YouTube, because for the council members that could not make it tonight, also for the public, there's a lot of information here. But what I'm going to need to have you do really is I need you to come up here and use the mic so you can get on camera for Tom and that we could record it. So I guess I'm going to sort of do this by sections if I could. I'm going to take the Joe Karen section over there. Is there anybody have any questions over there? And if you do, also there's some white cards. I forgot to mention that. If you can give me your white card, that way we'll get your name and address for the discussion that we can get put it on record. This is just a forum. This isn't a public hearing. So if you want to get on our mailing list, that's another thing. Give it to me when you leave if you don't come up to speak. So nothing from the Joe Karen group over here. Okay. Okay. Ian? Maybe introduce yourself for those that may not.
I may have more questions later, so I hope it's cool if I can come back up. Ian Stewart, I live here in town, 128 West Mansion Street. With the removal of the sediment, so that assumes all the sediment that's been collected within the impoundment, or only where the river, the natural river, will be in the future?
Sure. Yeah, so it assumed that 100,000 cubic yards was pulled out for the pilot channel, and then about another 500,000 would be left in place, moved around and left in place as part of floodplain excavation. So not all of the material would be taken away. There's about 1.5 million cubic yards based on the data that we have.
Okay, I'm going to take these small groups first. So I'll take the group over here where the mayor is, and any questions? Okay. Oh, you want to go last? Okay, we'll honor your. Okay, and we will take statements also if you want to do them now, or okay, all right. Well, you're ruining. Okay, okay. We'll save you for last. How does that sound? Okay, I'm going to come back over here. How about the first row here? Gentlemen, anything there? Third row there. Tim, oh, come on up then. This is your time really. You know, we have some council members here. We also have neighbors. We have people interested, so it'd be good. So if you can just maybe mention your name and address.
I'm Bill Collins. I'm at on Madison Street. You talked about having to take the sediment that you have and expose animals to it to see what the toxicity of it is. Hasn't that been done already? Why are we redoing something that's already been done with other dams that have been taken out? I mean, this is not new, guys. Why does it have to be done again? Isn't that money that could be saved and used for something else?
Well, can you hear me all right? Yes, there has been some limited amount of sediment toxicity, bioassays that have been done, but only on surface grabs. And so the issue is that if the material is going to become well mixed, so for example, let's imagine a scenario where it's okay if 300,000 yards goes downstream. That material is going to become well mixed, and it's going to be shifted around, moved around, and then deposited in other areas of the river. And so surface grabs have been collected, but across the full vertical length of the sediment, that has not been tested as yet. And so the issue may be that perhaps, and we don't know for sure, but there may be a strata in the vertical sediment column that is worse than another, for example. And so in order to get buy-off on allowing material to go downstream, we're going to have to be able to characterize that and say with a lot finer precision as to, we're going to have to characterize it in a lot more detail in order to make decisions about how much, where, laterally, longitudinally, vertically.
But you'll still have to determine what the stratification of these
Yes,
nasty elements are.
yes.
And the biggest problem, or a lot of expense that I see being put into this, is dealing with the sediment.
It is. It's the
Is there any
single
way to
biggest.
mat that sediment while you're working on it?
Is there what?
A way of matting that sediment? In other words, that it's, put some sort of barrier between the water and the sediment.
Well,
I mean, I've seen that, I've heard of that, where they've matted it. Nothing more than I'm going to just give you something like a rug on top of it so that you have
certainly, yeah.
a surface between that, so that you don't have to deal with the erosion going down. As you're draining this thing down, your biggest concern is moving it too fast so that the stuff goes down
Yes.
stream. Is there a way of protecting that so that you don't have to worry about
And there
that?
is. There certainly is. And those are fairly costly too, in that you're still moving a lot of material around. So you have to imagine, the impoundment is 3 miles long, right? And so if you were to put,
All 3 miles, well, you have to deal with all 3 miles with the sediment.
well, we don't know how much we have to deal with yet, and we won't know how long until the sampling is done.
All right, so
Yeah.
When is the test going to take?
It's something that happens
I haven't seen
fairly
anybody
quick.
out there testing anything other than I've heard.
Yeah, field data collection is probably maybe a week at most, but
What? 1 week?
maybe for the field data collection, and then
1 week you learn all this and just take.
no, well, it takes longer to run the bioassays, but it's not a significant effort in comparison to some of the other things that might happen. It's not an onerous big deal.
It was mentioned to me that some of you may well like to talk from your seats. The problem that we're going to have is Tom cannot get you on camera, but we'd have to have Cody and Paul come up here and we take the handheld. Okay, if you,
Tom, do you want us to stand over here?
okay, I'll restate the question. Is that okay, Tom?
Well, that microphone ain't meant to be passed around.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, I'll restate the question. So let me go back. If you don't want to come up, if you would, great. If you don't want to, that's okay. I'm going to go back into this row here. If anything,
So the cost is 2.2 million to repair, 40 million to remove, and 20 million to repair the drawdown.
yeah, the question was the 3 options, the numbers you saw on the board, based on current knowledge of the sediment.
So for $2.2 million, we can fix it, and it's good for 50 years.
Did you say 50 years? Or?
In the last presentation.
Well, the question was how long would the repair be good for?
You just hold it there, just.
Yeah, 50 years would be a typical lifespan for a dam replacement, correct?
Okay. Okay. All right, if you don't want to come up, I'll take your question. Come on up. And could you maybe introduce yourself also so that we can have it for the record?
Hi, my name is Tom Stewart, and I live in Eckford Township. It looks like Marshall is between a rock and a hard place. State and federal regulations are going to mandate this change of one kind or another. I pay school taxes to Marshall, but I don't know that my tax money in Eckford Township, property tax, is going to participate in this. Where does the local funding come from?
Very good question. It would either be from, if the local share would either be from the general fund, is where we get our taxes, or our electric department, our revenues that we receive from our electric rates. Those would be the two choices.
So the Eckford Township property taxes would not be a contributor?
Correct. You would not
Okay.
share in any of the cost.
I feel sorry for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good question. So I'm going to move back to the David, Tim, that row there. Okay. Jerry, you want to speak from there, or you want to come up here? Okay.
Hello, my name is Jerry Clifton. I live in Marshall Township, but I do have a number of businesses in the city of Marshall. I guess the first thing that I have to bring to the attention is that I've been in this community for all of my life. I'm just about 84 years old and been involved in businesses and so forth. I'm very aware of this river. I fished in it. I've used boating in there. At one time, you could take a speedboat and go up the Kalamazoo River. Now, you can't even take a fishing boat and go up there with a motor because you'll get stuck in various places. So what this really comes down to, we're talking environmental situations. Environmental problem and the silt in this river is not the Marshall's problem. It's Marshall's problem, but it was not the cause of the problem. The city of Albion is the cause of the problem. They've had all kinds of foundries there, machine shops, every type of manufacturing you can imagine. In prior years, until they've gone out of business, most of them, they were dumping their garbage in the Kalamazoo River. So what I'm saying is that the silt in that river cannot be cleaned up by 300 feet or a mile. This goes on and on. If you take out the silt in the river, there's more forthcoming. Whatever you get rid of, you're going to wash it down to our neighboring city of Battle Creek. I guess I am very concerned with the selection of this group to come up with this diagnosis. I'm in business, and whenever we come up with estimates, that's off $50 million on a short little project. That's not responsible. That's very irresponsible. And everything that you've mentioned here tonight is saying it can be fixed with a couple of feet and a couple of feet and a couple of feet. We know what has happened really is the city of Marshall has neglected our dam and the facility that's here. I've been around this dam many times. In fact, I was down there the beginning of spring looking at the dam. We have logs, we have junk, we have everything possible in front of the dam and in back of the dam. We have weeds and trees growing all around the entrance to the dam. As you mentioned, the fact that there are trees on these side areas that should not be there. Now, this is a neglect of the management of the city when they let things like this happen. And I'm very discouraged in this. How much, by the way, did your services cost us?
Beg your pardon?
You know, I think that's for the city to answer this question.
What?
If the city would like to answer that question, they can.
How much did this service cost us?
$54,000.
$54,000. Well, as you know, the city budget, we're kind of tight, aren't we? But there's no way possible that we can do anything but save this dam that's there and make repairs as we move along to try to keep from any things happening. We're always talking about the 100-year storm, which we know it happens in this world, and we have to be prepared, but we have to keep our facility as we go along spending local money to repair that. We can't go back to the taxpayer and say we need, we might need 50 million, or possibly we need $100 million. This would blow the mind of everybody that's here. You can't do that. And so I think this city is known for its historical values. The dam is one of them. The power plant is another one. We've made some bad decisions in the past of our utilities here in Marshall. 25 years ago, we had the option of getting out of the utility business. We're competing with Consumers Power. Other cities do not have their own electric services. Most of them are connected to Consumers Power. So this is step one. Step two is we're going to get rid of our plant here and come up with some other system. But the program should be that the city ought to be practicing a policy that we're going to get out of the utility business and get out and become competitive in the marketplace, because our utilities are outrageous. I have to say, we have to think even, why do we not have industry here? Because of the utility cost in this city. I get my little bill for things of just one of my properties, but there's things here like electric usage, electric service charge, power supply cost adjustments. All of these things I don't see on a consumer's bill. They know what the cost of a utility is. So I'm really concerned about what's happening here. It's nice to hear your thoughts, but I can't put much significance in them as to what we're going to do other than look at our dam, seeing what the problem is, trying to make adjustments that will save our community from going bankrupt and solving a problem. Thank you very much.
Just one thing I just want to make clear. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is requiring us to make repairs. So I just want to make, it isn't a choice, it's a requirement. Okay, Jack or Jack? Thank you.
I'll just irritate you. Yes, I do. I'm Jack Van de Bilgert, 615 North Drive. I spent 6 years in the city council, 6 years before that in the audience, being a real thorn in their side. The first thing is, I look at this thing and say, I think the dam ought to stay. We need to repair what we need to repair as we have done in the past. And you're right, Jerry, about maintenance. This city has been low in doing maintenance on anything. Parks, trimming bushes, simple as that. And it goes on to roads and everything else. And I know it's all money. But I do also know that we try to take and we're going to do a big project. We're going to build this great big building or whatever. And it makes us all look great. But we forget once we build that building or fix whatever it is, you got to maintain it every year. And there's little money for maintenance ever even considered in the budgets. And that's been that way for generations, I think. And it's high time that changed. The next thing ought to change is the fact that we cannot possibly look at $100 million. And if you take that dam out, as sure as I'm sitting there, that figure is going to be darn close to that. Can't help what your engineering and what your thinking is on this stuff. That's where it's going to be. Every project we run around here, you can throw 30% more on top of it, just sure as the world. And that's where it's going to be. Do we need to fix it? We're being told we have to fix it. The state can pay for it, damn it.
No, federal government.
Well, federal government can pay for it. Every time we're told we're gonna do something, we end up paying for it. I can't see where we can take 200, or 100,000, 200,000, $22,000 or $1 million and just dump it. We've got roads, we've got neighborhoods, we've got schools, we've got lighting systems, parks we're building left and right and really can't maintain. And yet we're blowing that money in that way. So the first thing is, their engineering being what it might be is great. Council, Jack, I can't believe that more than 20% at the very most, and they have got to be way left of Attila the Hun, is going to support putting this kind of money into that dam. Repairing it if we have to, yeah. But anything about taking it out and spending those kind of dollars, it can't happen. I can't afford it. I can't afford it on my tax bill, and that's where it's going to come down to. And I, like many others, won't be here. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, next to Jerry, if you'd like to, please. Or I take your question, one or the other.
Frank Baffey. I'm an Eckford Township farmer. I guess but I have a daughter and I've got a grandson that have homes, and they're probably both of them within a quarter mile of your dam, great-grandson. So anyway, I'm against this taking out any of these dams, mainly because these dams were put in, but you know, the wetlands they produce are replenishing the aquifer. Okay, now we took out a dam in Ceresco mainly because we had Enbridge money. Okay, I went to a soil conservation meeting in February. The dams were took out in the fall. I asked the speaker, and there was already people whose wells have gone dry. If you go out the river road, there's center pivots, the old Star Farm, they're sucking water out of the ground like you can't believe. And if you take these dams out, I don't care which one it is. It's like flushing these rivers right down over the Niagara Falls, and they're already talking about sea level rising. And we're not going to have water here to drink, and those people are going to have too much. And another thing is, I can't see, this is a no-brainer. It's like spending $2.50 or $100. And if you got this dam, I don't know, this berm, but you know, we're taking out more rocks than these farmers. In 100 acres, you could make that thing 200 feet wide with stone that ain't never gonna leave. I mean, it's here. I mean, within 3 miles of here. I mean, there's more stones that as big as this. You could put them all up and down through there where you got a hole, throw them. You say it's washing out in front of the dam, fill her up with stone. You know, we don't have to strive for couth. All we got to do is fix the problem. I guess I said that. You know, I'm getting there. I'm a AAA member. I've got arthritis, I've got asthma, and an attitude.
I'm going to go to the row where Greg's at. We'll do that row next.
I'm Greg Potter. I live at 906 South Kalamazoo, and you keep really throwing me off my game. I didn't want to be here tonight. I made a couple phone calls because I saw the numbers that came through on the dam removal, and they were just astronomical. They were just a lot of money. So I called my one of those agencies that you were concerned about, and they told me that they saw your numbers, and they were projecting around $5 million. Now you're at 8 to 20 times that. That's it. Now I'm not asking you to defend that. That's not why I'm here. But we've been involved with the Bryce Creek Dam removal. that one, we ended up spending some money on some engineering, and when they opened up that engineering at that meeting, everybody in the room knew that that it was not going to be accepted by anybody. So we got to redo that engineering. Okay. We've been working on the Rice Creek Dam removal for 13 years? Well, 10 plus. Yeah, 10 plus. And the reason we talked about the dam removal to begin with was that I was concerned that the bridge on Marshall would be able to handle all the Kalamazoo River at some point in time. Because sooner or later, the dam's going to come out. It may not be now, it may be our grandkids that do it or our great-grandkids, but dams don't belong there, and eventually they're going to come out. On this particular project, I'm not really too concerned whether it comes out now or if we maintain the powerhouse and the dam. But what I do want to do is I want to make sure that we have good information to make our decisions on. Since the original Rice Creek project, it just never went right. The flows weren't right in the channels. The bridge, getting into the north parking lot had to be changed, had to be made bigger. Okay, and the group that I work with, Kalamazoo Valley Trout Unlimited, kicked in an extra $2,000 to get that bridge wide enough on the north channel so that we could change the flows in there. We tried to set those weirs as designed. Well, they didn't get quite set to design. The design didn't work. Okay, so now Michigan Trout Unlimited and Kalamazoo Valley has a $260,000 grant, and that money is going to do what we should have done when we did that dam removal to begin with, and that was to go through, find the information. We've got biologists in there. We have volunteers doing it. We're going to spend that money, and what we're going to do is, because people ask me, well, what are you going to do with the stream? We're going to do what the stream tells us. If the chemicals are there, or if we need to move some sediment, then we'll move some sediment. But we're not projecting out until we know what we're doing. And to be honest with you, as far as the city council, I don't think that you have the information that you need. I think what you need is you need to do, people hate this, and I hate it. Nobody wants to wait. But right now, unless we know what we're doing, I think we're just way too premature on making a final decision whether we're going to remove it, whether we're going to replace it, or what we are going to do with it. But I'm supposed to be someplace else. I appreciate you guys putting up with me. Thank you.
Just one thing real quickly before Greg leaves. The Kalamazoo River Bridge, Marshall over Kalamazoo River, the DEQ is requiring us to widen that bridge to handle the full flow of the river. So the new bridge that'll be constructed next spring will be able to take, with or without the dam in there, it'll take the full river flow. Just, I think I mentioned that, Greg, when he was in my office not too long ago.
Tom?
Yeah.
Tom, if we could respond to one of the points.
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
The $5 million figure, it perhaps is true that a person from DEQ has said that to you,
Multiple
but
people.
nobody has been willing to go on record with us with that kind of a number. So we have to use the information that we received from DEQ in our numerous contacts that we made. And I think there are people who are, I think he may be speculating on what would be the case if the sediment turns out not to be so bad. And I think we could also come to an agreement that it's going to be a smaller number. We're totally in agreement with that. If it can be proven, as you have suggested, that the sediment is not as toxic. So
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. What I said is let's find out what we're doing before we do it.
Well, and your bigger point is true, that a more extensive study is needed to get to that point where you could say that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's fair to ask these people to make a decision without the information they need. And you guys took some information that whether or not it was complete, obviously it wasn't complete, but whether or not it was correct, and you made assumptions on there, which is what you were asked to do. But I don't think, as far as the city council and as far as our city ourselves, I don't think we have the information to make an intelligent decision. No. But all right, thanks for the time.
We'll see you.
Thanks.
We'll stay in Greg's row. The couple there, any questions? I can repeat your question. Sir, any questions, or I can, okay. We'll move back to Shannon's row back there. Greg or Brent, okay. Brent, are you going to talk at all? Or, okay. Brent has given us a letter from the Conservation District, so we'll have that to council.
Hello, my name is Greg Strand at 335 North Mulberry. I just wanted to echo, and not because we have the same name, but Greg Potter's comments. We're not in lock and step in terms of what the data is, agreeing or disagreeing, or what DEQ or DNR regulatory agents are saying, or what the city is neglecting in the past or moving forward in the future. But we don't have enough data. Everything that I've looked at, I was involved in the Race Creek Dam removal, for better or worse. These projects are complicated. DNR does not completely know what they're doing. DEQ does not completely know what they're doing. They don't have decisions made ahead of time. So to sit on whether it's 2.2 million for a repair, 22 million for a drawdown and repair, or 45 to 100 million for removal, we don't know. And I guess I do have a question of, in lieu of that data, are you confident with those numbers, or would you repeat the fact that that could vary from 100 million to 5 million? Because that's information, again, that Greg Potter reiterated. City Council shouldn't make a decision on a variable between 5 million and 100 million, because the difference between 2 million and 5 million may be achievable with grants, it may be achievable with other funding sources, but there's a huge variation in there, and what it all comes down to is data. The other thing it comes down to, and this is the part that I don't think Stantec or anybody can predict, is what does DNR say when we actually put them to the test of making a decision on can we or can't we do this, or DEQ. We don't know some of these things, and so I feel bad for the city. I feel bad for us taxpayers that have to look at this and say, but if we're only left with a choice of do we go with 2 million, 45 million, or 100 million, I know I'd go with the 2 million. That's simple. That's not a decision that I think is complicated. What I think is complicated is the reality behind that decision. And so I don't think the city, the taxpayers, city council, or DNR and DEQ should jump to that conclusion at this point. So what I'm recommending is that we buy ourselves a little bit of time, and if you could just comment on that variability. Are you sure that 100 million is a number? Are you sure that 45 million is a number? Are you sure that 2 million is a number for repair? That's the only thing I'd ask Stantec to comment on, and we don't have, I don't think, DNR or DEQ here to comment on their reality. But last recommendation, a little bit of time, more data, more conversations with the decision makers that need to make them. This is on behalf of the taxpayers, myself included. We need information to make a good decision. Let's not make it on 2, 45, or 100, because we don't know that those are good numbers to make a decision on.
Well, let me try to answer your question, and if I can't do a good enough job, I want to hand it off to my partner. But so, you know, I guess in the same way that those toxic levels are sort of screening decision-making factors, I mean, this study was a sort of a screening study in the sense of, let's take the information that we have and see what that adds up to, and then see if a decision can be made on that basis. We feel good about our numbers on the basis of the information that we have. I think that's a short story. But as we say right in the report, there's a lot of pencil sharpening that can be done with more information. There's no doubt about it.
And so I guess I'm saying that the pencil sharpening at 100 million down to 2 is sharp. And I'm not sure we can get there. I think for the sake of these
$2 million is pretty optimistic. I mean, that is basically what you call a blow and go, right? We're just going to let it go downstream. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you can comment. Could that ever be a conceivable alternative with this dam? I just don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's a theoretical alternative.
Yeah, I guess I would say, you know, the blow and go scenario is not my decision. But if you were to do that, then yeah, I think your costs become more comparable, right?
Blowing the dam out and moving it?
Well, that's kind of a loose way to say, you know, you just take the dam out without doing any kind of sediment management. Okay? We're still, you would still be required to take it down incrementally and very slow. It's not like you would go down and stick dynamite on it or something. We don't do that. They do that in some parts of the world. We don't do that. And so But yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at the cost tables and you back the sediment numbers out, you know, you get costs that are a little more comparable. And so, yeah, that's achievable, but there are a large number of people that have to make decisions about that it's okay.
And I guess I'd close by saying I'm not trying to throw a bunch of water on your study and say that it's not legitimate, that those numbers aren't realistic in some way, in some scenario. But to City Council, to the city, I think we need more information. And again, it's to reiterate Greg Potter's point, and I think everybody's point, that it's really easy to make a decision on 2 million versus 45 million versus 100 million, but it doesn't seem that we have the information to make that decision at this point. So it'd be nice if the city and others would maybe make some recommendations for how we can quickly move towards getting the data that we need, that you need, that all of us need to make some informed actual estimates. And I think DNR and DEQ need to be in this room to help us understand this, because again, I don't believe that they have a conclusive answer for if you have these contaminants, then A, B, and C happen. They don't know either. But thousands of communities across the country are dealing with the same situation. So somebody said it, this is not that unique to Marshall. This is not just Albion had manufacturing. Marshall had manufacturing. Kalamazoo has manufacturing. We in a lot of ways are in a good position in the upper part of the watershed. Get down to the lower Kalamazoo, and then we're really dealing with some issues. So I think we have to deal with this in a public way like this. I think City Council needs to take a little more time, get a little more information, and make a decision, again, with some time urgency, but with more information. That's the last thing.
Mike, you're coming from the perspective that the dam's got to go no matter what.
I'm coming from the perspective of taxpayer, that I can make an easy decision of 2 versus 100 million. I know we need to do the $2 million option right now. Yes, ultimately, I think we're going to deal with that sediment, we being Marshall, Albion, Calhoun, Michigan, the United States. We have to deal with that contamination at one point or another. How we do that, I don't exactly know. What I do know is we don't have enough information right now to make a final conclusion that 2 million is a number we can deal with and 100 million is a number that we can't, because that's not based on the real scenario that we might be dealing with if we did the studies that we needed to do. So no, I'm not concluding that the dam has to go. At some point, it will take care of itself if we don't do something. But my recommendation to the city is that we just take a little more time, get a little more information, and make an informed decision.
You're next.
Hello, I'm Brett Reiser. I'm an aquatic biologist with the Calhoun Conservation District. I also live in Eckford Township, but I pay city utilities. So I am actually the one that performed the sediment sampling. The city had contacted the Conservation District to try to help them to get an idea of what was really going out there. So, you know, looking at these 3 different scenarios, alternatives, I'd like to reiterate the same thing. I don't feel as if alternative 3, that there's enough information in that alternative. There's some other options, and I think we need to take a look, and speaking directly to City Council and the City of Marshall, I think we need to take a harder look at what's really going on here. This is a long-term situation. Even if we fix this dam, that sediment's still up there, that sediment's still sitting there. You know, people have talked about what's going to happen if we, you know, remove this dam and mobilize sediment. I got news for you, sediment is mobilizing every time the river rises and falls. So this thing is not going to go away. It's something that needs to be looked at further. And I'd like to get the work group that we had organized to take a look at Stan Tech's proposal. I'm not here to bash alternative 3. I just think that we don't have enough information to move forward. That's it.
Doug Kelly, Ron?
I was got something to say. Been a few years, so a few years, excuse me. Ron Goodwin, 330 South Mulberry Street, Marshall, Michigan. Give you a little history about the river. probably 35 years ago, I would say 30 maybe, that Gurney and them drew down the river. Okay? The river was drawn down. You had one little stream going up the river, all the sediment. So you're saying if you draw it down 6 feet, you're going to get all the sediment still flowing through the powerhouse. Correct? That's what you feel?
I think you're going to start to move a lot of that sediment, yeah.
Well, it didn't move much when they drew that down. You just ended up with a creek that went up through. And if I remember correctly, we got fined.
I wasn't here, Ron.
Yes, you were. You were, or then you were just before us. But anyway, we got fined for killing all the fish in the river from drawing it down so far. We had to fix the hydros. So we planted all these fish. Now we're talking about tearing the dam down, drawing it all down again. Upstream, you have Hog Island, you have all these swamps. What's the DNR going to do about that? They're going to say, well, you've trapped our fish, they've died, so now that we've got the river flowing again, you're going to have to spend X amount of dollars to replant. I don't want the dams gone, number one. The dams, I've been here 65 years. I was on city council when Greg and Greg presented us this beautiful Rice Creek thing that turned into a fiasco, I'm sorry to say, but now we have to pay people that live along Rice Creek to fix their basements because there's too much water. I saw that in the paper. Brent said it, Mr. Heidenreich, I think it is. So now we're taking care of their basement.
No, we're not doing any basement.
All right, then you're fixing the wall by it because they're getting so much water in their basement. I'm just saying, but these are things that are happening. And what's going to happen with this, I just don't think everybody understands everything that's going on. I mean, we voted to pull down the dam at Rice Creek. To me, it looks horrible. I mean, we put a Kids Kingdom in there, but we've got weeds growing all the way behind it. I mean, nobody maintains it, nobody takes care of it. When we were presented this when I was on city council, it was going to be beautiful waterfalls, the beautiful rocks were going to sit here, and it was just going to be a gorgeous thing. Didn't turn into that. So in my opinion, I think the dam should stay. I think you should fix the buffer area. And I still think, couldn't you do more if you draw it down to get to that from going through the powerhouse, all the water, that you'll be able to move your heavy machinery in there without as much cost to clean it up? I don't know, but you guys are the experts. You guys, we paid $54,000 for to give us a study. We have people who want the dam out that are calling places to try to get the dam out, but they're saying it's going to be $5 million instead of your $100 million. I mean, exactly what you said about blowing it up. You could blow it up, let it run downstream, yeah, it'd be $150,000 probably, but you don't do it that way. And upstream, you're still going to get sediment. Like Mr. Clifton was saying, you know, Albion is one of the problems, but there was farther upstream, I'm sure. And now we have the problem to fix. I hate to see us spend even $2 million, but I know you have to spend it because the government's saying fix it. And I know that the hydros, when I worked here, we got free power from the water. And then I read this thing that says it's costing us $20,000, $30,000 to $40,000 a year to run the hydros. That's impossible. I don't believe it. I really don't. I mean, those hydros turn, they grease them. If you lose a bearing or something, I can see that. But I don't see that much cost in those hydros, and I'm for the hydros. So all I say is fix the dams, and maybe we can live with that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to just one. Ron, the money that is going into the hydros are for all the FERC required studies that we have to do invasive species. Oh, every year there's a whole slew. Yeah, okay. Okay, do you want to speak from there?
I think I can talk loud enough from here. I don't want to be on camera, honestly. These guys camera, did it swing that far? Can you swing?
I can swing.
I don't really want to be on the camera. Anyway, my name is Vicki Miller. I moved back here about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to help my father. He had some land on Beach Drive North, and I happened to get one of his lots from him. I actually am supposed to, I saw an attorney about this, because about in 2011, I tried to get a building permit. And I had to go through the DEQ because my land was floodplain / wetland. And it was designated wetland. It took 4 years to get a building permit. Go through a bunch of stuff. I had to have a lot of things, I had extra things done like soil boring tests down to bedrock and elevation studies. Or, surveys. Any kind of survey you could think of I had. And then I got turned down by the township and to do that appeal. So anyway, in I think November 2015, I got the building permits. December the final one. And you had to start this in the winter because that's when the floodplain wetland is dry. There were construction companies that wouldn't work with me. This is through the 4 years waiting because they knew of the problem probably. Banks that wouldn't work with me. So this went on and on and on. I finally get it started and all this. Now the city says, well, we're taking, and I'm 100 feet back from the water. If you take out the dam, then I'm going to be 200 feet from the water. And there's about 6 houses from the city limits forward that way. And they're all back from the water. If you take that dam out, they're going to be another 50 to 100 feet back from the water. It's not frontage, water frontage. I got as close as I could, but they specified exactly. I cannot be a foot farther south. I cannot be a foot farther east or west. Which was it? East. And this is what I couldn't only have so many cubic feet of dirt. Even when I was allowed more, they said, no, no, no. That will impact the wetland. That will destroy the protected wetland. So I jumped through all these hoops and all this, and now it's not going to be wetland. If you take out, if you do the drawdown a half a foot every 24 hours, I'll tell you about 30 years ago, Charkwitz, do you know, Mr. Charkwitz, when they did that last dam, they put in a secondary dam, and they did a drawdown, like somebody was saying.
Yeah, I think.
Very narrow, Ron. I agree with a lot of stuff Jerry Clifton says about the neglect and all that. But back to this, and they did the drawdown. You did not, everything died. You did not hear one cricket, one frog, one anything. It died. The wetlands died. It wasn't designated then, but now it is, thanks to whatever. And it's identified. And mine is 1 3/4 acres. Next to me is 2.134 acres, which belongs to somebody. It's landlocked. It's non-buildable, according to everybody. But I cannot see how you can either do a drawdown or take out the dam because it will kill the wetlands there. I can't see how you can do it. I can't see how the city can do it. I can't see how the state can make anybody do it because it's federally protected. I don't know. Now, people say they're going to do whatever they want to do. Both the city, and the state, whatever, and I know there's some like national movement, green movements, take all the dams out in the whole United States and do what they want to do, go back natural, but you will get problems like Ron said about these basements, and it's not only locally here that I've heard about this flooding of the basements and all these problems. Anyway, I was supposed to get on the record that 1, I'm against the removal of the dam and anything that degrades the wetlands, at least on mine, and I've had to take it farther because I don't know. And I'm supposed to get on the record the reasons why, very clear. So I guess protect the wetlands would, you wouldn't be able to take the dams out. If you do take it out, then you're injuring the ecosystem. There are certain birds that they're around there and they only land on those wetland plants. We've identified the species of the plants there. And I don't get it. Anyway, I gotta make sure I cover this. So it's important to leave it as is, to continue this protected wetland. Removing the dam drains the water away from the land, and the water recedes, so everything will die. But I've gotten 2 wetland by, I don't know, how many inches, 4 inches by how many inches, that have to come out of the wetland because it will dry it out and damage it. So, I can't imagine if you draw that water down, how that's not damaging. I don't get that. All the species, all the microscopic, whatever we can't even see with our eyes, and the animals that count on it. So I can't, well, let's see, property values decrease along there. Honestly, people who move to the country go there for less traffic, more wildlife, more quiet. I don't know if that's always true. But it was water frontage, and I agree with these people that it's Jerry that said he's lived here all his life. I lived here all my life except for a couple times I left for jobs and back. But anyway, I was around when they did the Ketchum Park fiasco thing. It was beautiful. I think people that they said they spent $200,000, the city said, they spent $200,000 a year maintaining Ketchum Park. Ketchum Park Dam, that is totally not. That is, they couldn't prove that, I don't think.
I'm not sure where that number came from.
But anyway, it was already like broken sandstone, it was not maintained. And the same thing for down here. I agree with all these logs and these trees and these weeds and this whatever. All the time it's not maintained. I don't know what that the city says they pay for maintenance, but whatever they say, it's not true. And another thing, the state of Michigan has paid millions and millions, have paid out millions and millions for at least the last 30 years. They've been cleaning up the water. And we didn't used to have a lot of different kinds of fishes. But I can tell you there's some people that live down a quarter of a mile down, and in the last 10 years, they've been catching sunfish, and bluegills, sunfish, rock bass. The fish have changed. I can also say there's at least, I know, 6 wells right along the river that the people drink the water from it. Calhoun County Health Department did their tests, find a drink. Also, some other information, that whole bed that lays along the river is all clay. It's all clay, and of course it holds the water in. It's a beautiful system. As you go down to exactly a quarter of a mile, when my dad went there, he had to usually use explosive whatever, because that is solid sandstone. Now down where I am, right, well not too far from the dam, but it's in the, what do they call that, the mill pond. They hold the water back, the dam does, and it makes this bigger mill pond area. And my father used to tell me stories when he was a little boy. That mill pond, what they did there is they cut up the ice, you know, we had the refrigerators with the chunks of ice, and he would be down there when they were cutting the ice, and they would load it in the truck and take it to the houses. And Grandma had, that's the kind of fridge she had. And so everybody has all these kind of stories of the mill pond and how wonderful it is. And if anybody knows anything about water, you know that water's going to carry dirt and dust and sand and grit and whatever. And sooner or later, it's just all, but when it gets heavy enough, it drops to the bottom, and that's where all this silt is. It's going to keep going, it's going to keep coming, it's a problem that we're going to have all the time. So, I don't know, that's about all the junk I can say. We got the historical reasons. I can't believe the National Society, Historic Society isn't somehow involved in, you know, that's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. The third oldest dam in the whole United States is hydroelectric. Then the other thing, I read, but I don't know where and I don't know the percentage, that in Michigan, if you have municipality electrical or utilities, you have to get, was it 15% or 10% by a green source?
Correct.
Which we've got it. We don't have to buy it from somebody else. I know Jerry said we buy it from somebody else, get it cheaper. But we have that green right here.
Yeah, it's not enough to meet that requirement. So we do have other hydros where we buy
We
from.
have to buy the other hydro order from
Yeah.
somebody else. Is that Kentucky, Ohio, whatever?
Yeah, we'd have some on the Ohio River, some in Menominee and Acatano Falls, Wisconsin.
But I
So,
mean the ones that are
right,
connected?
yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that's what I think about it, and I was just about ready to blow up. That's why I had to talk.
I was waiting for you, so I mean, no problem.
Oh, also, I wanted to say about recreation. And this went also, I don't think people realize, in the city, I say the city, because there are people that have lived here all their lives, that when we had Ketchum Park, people walked to that to see actually something active, moving, alive in the city. They might have plain very boring lives. And they would walk there and they would see the water moving. And they loved it. And they fished there and they did things like that. And the same for this Kalamazoo Dam. I don't think people realize how many people love that water and come down and fish. Or drive by and they look and they see that water, just like the Ceresco Dam. You drive by now and you go, yeah, that's grass. And we know there's some water. I just hate it. So, that's it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, you're next. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I might have to get a shorter mic here. My name's Mark Lawyer, and I'm a property owner in Marengo Township. I happen to, my wife and I happen to own the land where Wilder Creek comes under Division Drive, and it joins up with the Kalamazoo River. And I guess the reason I'm here is because everybody in this room should know that whatever we do with the dam is going to affect the river all the way to my house, including Wilder Creek. Wilder Creek would be reduced probably to what you see over on B Drive, which is a creek that's a little wider than this doorway there, and would completely destroy the waterfowl habitat that is up behind my property and up under Wilder Creek there that we have now. She mentioned ruining the wetlands. I tried to dig a pond on my property, and there was a stack of papers this high because of where I wanted, and there was actually a little pond area there that I just wanted to dig out, but it was a wetland, so that I couldn't do the pond. And with what the dam removal would do to the area up there, I believe it kind of contradicts what everything else I've ever heard of removing a wetland. It would completely ruin that. Now, people can drive by Ceresco and they look and they say, well, boy, that looks halfway decent there. The river's there and it's grass there, there's trees there, but I don't believe the city of Marshall has the money to go back up 3 miles up the river and not only remove the sediment that far, because if you're gonna, how far was your $99 million estimate gonna remove the sediment?
You know, I can't remember the exact distance that the pilot
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
I can't remember the exact distance that the pilot channel went, but it was pretty significant, yeah.
Because there's sediment
it's not 3 miles.
Well, there's sediment that far up the river, okay? So you remove that sediment, you create a faster flowing river, and your sediment's right back to where it was, and you blew $50 million for nothing. So, in my opinion, I was at the last meeting, and I believe you, sir, mentioned that additional testing for the sediment was in the $200,000 range to determine the amount of contaminants in it farther than what you have so far. Was that correct? So $200,000. There's a $200,000 grant available to repair the dam. You save the $200,000 on the testing. You do the cofferdam to repair the dam. And although it's not maybe the long-term solution we'd all like to have, where you're freeing up getting rid of all that bad sediment up the river, somebody said something about buying time, and I guess that's what it does, because I don't think the city of Marshall, and I'm a Marengo Township taxpayer, although I spend about $18,000 in property taxes here in the city, and if this was to come to a vote for the city, I wouldn't even have a vote. And I own a 1.5 miles of river frontage and Wilder Creek frontage, and I wouldn't even have a vote in the matter, and it would affect me as much as it would anybody. So I'm standing here saying that I think the council should consider everybody that lives upstream, as well as probably what's the right thing to do for the city's financial responsibility, and that'd be to repair the dam with a cofferdam. Okay, thank you.
Sir, are you interested in speaking or have a question? Okay.
I'm Roy Heusler, 901 Wooded Lane here in Marshall. I haven't been privy to the complete discussion on this, but I heard some discussion about doing a fast drawdown, blowout of the dam, so to speak, I would indicate a certain amount of caution be in line before considering that. Years ago, they took out a dam on, up in Newaygo, and they didn't spend a lot of time worrying about sediment control. The dam went out, a huge amount of sediment went downstream, and when that happens, it increases the flood stage for all the downstream areas. So when you get a flood downstream, people's property gets flooded, which would not ordinarily be flooded, and they turn around and sue the people who took the dam out, saying you didn't consider that, and now we have flood damage, and that's something I think should be considered in looking further at the options. So
Thank you.
that's all I got.
Velma or Ms. Mew?
I'm Jim Needham. I live at 136 West Mansion in Marshall, and I also own property in Marengo Township called Hog Island. I'm just downriver from Mark, and what is an island now will not be an island if you draw down or take down the dam. And I'm very concerned about what will be left in the form of sediment, which will become my property and my liability. So if you do decide to take down the dam and leave us with sediment and not take it all out, I'd like to have you do the study to tell us at least what it is that's in there that you're leaving us with. I know that you spoke at one time about recommending 12 more samples be taken so that you had actual different levels. That would be one way of doing that, and you also could have the testing done. We should know what really is in there if you're consider taking the dam out. If you don't take it out, it'll be underneath the water and it won't make any difference anymore.
Velma?
Hello, my name's Velma West, and I live at 502 Homer Road on the southeast corner of Homer Road and South Marshall. So I'm right across the street from the dam and where the water overflows and goes across, and right where the new bridge is going to be built next year. Welcome to South Marshall, everybody. Plan your detour route now. First question, Tom, is there a time limit that you have to, that the federal government is saying you have to get this done by?
Do you want to answer that, Ed?
Yes.
Maybe.
I don't believe they have a, I think indications are from the FERC out of Chicago, Chicago Regional Office, is that as long as we're making progress to some resolution to this problem, they'll go along with us. But I don't believe they're going to let us go 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
But as long as we're working on it like we're doing right now, they're been pretty agreeable.
Okay.
Go ahead, keep going.
Keep going, or you want to say, okay.
No, no.
I brought this up the last time that you spoke, and if you draw if the dam goes away and you have all this sediment and you have to literally put it in something and take it away, what is the air quality? What's going to affect the people who live around that when all that soil is exposed, and for how long? And where do you take this stuff? That's, I'll do my questions in segments.
Sure. You know, generally the air quality is not an issue with that. You know, most of the, if I understand your question, you're asking specifically about chemical constituents or?
Yeah, the chemicals that are left when you drain it all out and you start taking it away and you're stirring up all this sediment and putting it in trucks or whatever you do.
Yeah, from a chemical perspective, you know, anything that would volatilize to the atmosphere is probably already gone. And so you're left with the things that don't evaporate well. That's not exactly true, but I wouldn't expect health effects or anything like that. other question about where does it go, it depends on the nature of the material. You know, it could go to a solid waste landfill, but maybe it has to go to a hazardous waste landfill. There are varying degrees of disposal facilities and containment types. And it just kind of depends on what it is. Again, we don't really know.
Okay, so until you do these additional tests, you know that there's something there.
And to be fair too, I think we don't know that it needs to go there. In fact, it's probably likely that it doesn't need to go there for the vast majority of it. Probably does not need to be hauled off to a facility, but some of it might.
Not do core tests? You guys didn't do any core testing?
There was, yes. Six cores, I believe.
How far down were the contaminants in the core?
They were homogenized across, Brett could probably answer that better than I can, but as I understand it, they were homogenized across the core.
The whole core was a mix, so you can't tell in the strata where it's at.
And as I understand it too, Brett.
Is that at the look at the report, anywhere from 2 to 8 feet, 9 feet?
And as I understood your report too, there were no visible strata in the cores, and so they appear to be well mixed, by eye.
Yeah, according to the procedure protocol, if there's no different strata, you don't need to take 2 different samples. You just homogenize it into one.
The other thing, depending on the characteristics, the city does own 88 acres, would be east of the boat launch there, where we now have our compost center. We had talked to DEQ, the potential if that might be a site to do water. I did a project in Three Rivers where we pumped it 3 blocks, dewatered it, and then we actually hauled it away after that. It was actually good topsoil. It wasn't contaminated, fortunately, but. So Velma,
okay.
Dump it there, and then the rain comes, pushes all it down and right into the water table again. So that doesn't even make any sense.
You have a large landfill there, 100 and some years ago, too, right?
Velma?
Okay, so back to if we continue the studies and you hire these gentlemen to do additional core samples and whatever else testing that needs to be done, city have the budget for that?
No, but if we have to do it, we will do it. And that's something that council, after they're hearing, a lot of council is here, they're going to take this back and we're going to sometime, we haven't set a date yet, but to actually have them or give us direction on what is the next step. So depending on what the costs are, then we would need to budget it, and that would probably come out of the electric fund since the dam is electric, so.
Okay. One more question. Back to these gentlemen, sorry. There's option 1, 2, and 3. I'm going towards the I think option, not taking the whole dam out, but fixing the dam wall there. And I think I call it the first dam by the water power plant, the first dam, then you have the earthen dam, then you have the other. And if you do that, was it Coffer Dam that goes across and you divert all that water that comes across and goes back into the original flow of the river? How's that going to affect, I mean, like I say, I could throw a stone right now and hit, well, I couldn't, some people could, and hit the river. I mean, there's already a marsh or a wetland back in there. And how's that going to affect the person who lives across the street from me, his backyard, but for me who lives across the street?
Yeah, ma'am, as part of the detailed design, we would have to do a hydraulic study to see how that water is going to behave in this new situation. And in fact, DEQ would require us to do that. So I think it would just be something to look at as part of the detailed design. If during that process it turned out that it was going to cause too much potential flooding, then it may take that alternative right off the table, frankly. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Brian? Okay, we'll go back to Jim or Brian, whichever end you guys want to, the four of you there. Brian?
Evening, everyone. My name is Brian Huggett. I live at 319 North Mulberry Street here in town. First, I just want to say thanks to the city for organizing all this. This is to the admin staff, to the engineers, to the utilities. You got a tough row to hoe putting all this together, so I appreciate the work. To you fellas, I think you did a really good job explaining that uncertainty in the sediment estimates and then also in the toxicity, because I think that that's probably, you know, outside of these alternatives that we're discussing here tonight. I think it's this toxicity issue that is really the big deal that's going to drive, it's going to drive the cost, it's likely going to drive what we do with it. So I think you did a pretty good job explaining that uncertainty, so thanks. You know, and I guess, you know, my comments just go to city council members here tonight. As a little perspective, this problem that we have right now is like 120 years in the making, right? I mean, so we don't need to make a decision right now, especially I think in light of some of the uncertainty that we've kind of outlined and kind of skirted around a little bit tonight. So my recommendation, you know, if it was me in charge, would be to understand not only the sediment volumes, the toxicity, but, you know, what are the options with some of the regulators that we have here? Because, you know, it may very well be that, you know, we are unable to remove that dam, but, you know, any option that we're talking about here tonight is going to alter the face of that historic structure, right? So this masonry wall is likely not going to be a masonry wall with that historic character any longer. So anything we do alters the face of that. So that, and I would also kind of encourage the city council to seek some advice from the regulators. There's the Otsego Township Dam is undergoing a very similar, there's a lot of parallels in the story with the Otsego Township Dam removal. It's being removed by the Michigan DNR and the US EPA. You know, it contaminated sediments, aging infrastructure, and then, you know, these really kind of cost prohibitive actions. You know, dam removal is obviously really complex. People are drawn to the water, right? I mean, we have some landowners here who have that, you know, that connection to it, just like a lot of us do. So, you know, ecologically, economically, sociologically, it's a complex issue. So, really what I would like to do is just really to encourage us to kind of take it slow, because, you know, according to Mr. Rice, FERC is really not requiring action on this tomorrow. So more, better data. So thanks, everyone. Yeah.
I guess the only thing, if I may, that
Sorry.
No, I just want to point out that it is an ongoing risk factor, okay?
Sure.
So, again, I'm not saying there's something that's going to happen immediately in the next year, next 5 or 10 years, but the longer it sits out there, the more the risk is present of those factors that we've discussed. So,
right.
You know, so there should be a good balancing reason there to wait. You know, for example, I think, well, I think removing that water main is a risk reducer. You know, and so taking that out of there is a factor that is a thing that could justify waiting, but I just think that there needs to be a engineering reason for doing so, that you don't want to let this string along indefinitely and just add study upon study. So
yeah, I totally agree, and you know, and I'm glad that I have the second thought here is that, you know, even if we choose to repair the dam, there's still this issue of contaminated sediments, and regulators are not likely to just let us store them there indefinitely, right? So even if we have this $2 million option, it's a $2 million kick the can down the road to our children, et cetera, because sedimentation is a naturally occurring process, right? It's all gonna come downriver. And, you know, I mean, and I don't know this, you know, this is part of that uncertainty question, is that, you know, is it a historic contamination? Is it ongoing? Is it episodic? Is it, you know, so there's just some uncertainty there. So if we can wrap that up, then, you know, we can make better decisions. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Jim, you're...
It's getting harder and harder for the older guys to get up from their seat and do this. Hi, everyone. Jim Curry, 712 Gorham here in Marshall. Just had a couple of really quick things to say. I'd like to really agree with Greg Strand, Greg Potter, and Brian Huggett and echo what they were saying, not to remove the dam or any of the other options. Let's take our time. Let's get in and see what those sediments hold. I agree with Brian there and Brett. I'd like to defend Greg Strand a little bit. He's been criticized for the Rice Creek. I don't know if you know that Greg raised almost $300,000, maybe more, for this city to go forward. He didn't make a lot of the decisions on that, but he raised the money for you all. God bless all of you that go into the front and raise money for this city so they can do some things. We are blessed with volunteers that do this all the time, and he was one of them. Just real quickly, we're asked, you know, when was the last great storm? 1988, we had a drought year just like we had in 2012. The year after that, in May of 1989, we had a 100 to 500 year storm, 9 to 12 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, and I think it affected our whole region. For management of the dam, I'd just like to ask, the sediment buildup in the future, we're talking about the dam in the last 50 years, how long will the sediment be there? How long will it accumulate? I work with the Corps of Engineers in some of the major dams out west on the Columbia and the Snake River. They had constant problems with sediment buildup and having to dredge constantly behind their dams. It's a problem with dams, and you have to ask yourself, not only that, but I think Brian and others made a great point. 50 years, it may not last even a quarter of that time. So we're going to have to deal with this in the future, and it's going to come. I really would like to see the sediments tested more completely so we know what we're going to deal with. So just do more extensive studies. I do agree with that. It's going to be costly, but we need to bite that bullet. If we need funds, maybe if the sediments are badly polluted, then maybe something like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, if that's not canceled by the current administration, would be a place that we could start to look for funding for that. As far as historical perspective, I'm sorry to make you angry, but the Potawatomi were here before us. They were removed in 1839 and their land's taken. I wonder what they would feel right now. They love free-flowing rivers, and for a reason. They're back now and a real economic force in our county, and we're going to have to listen to them a little bit too. Thank you.
I think we've covered everybody. Tom, are we running out of time on your? Okay. I guess, is there any final questions, or I can wrap up? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my only thing is, I feel like we can't ignore the sediment. We need to know how it got there. We need to study that, and we need to know how it's affecting the surface water at this time, and to go along with the sediment accumulation. What do we do when the sediment fills, and how long do we have to fill it?
Well, that's a good question. Another client of mine has had the same problem. They don't have any interest in taking out the dam, but their pond is almost absolutely full. I mean, somebody mentioned you can't run a motorboat up and down. I mean, they can't even run a rowboat in this lake anymore because it's like right there, and they want just to dredge it out and clean it out. So that sooner or later that would happen. Correct, and maybe you're already there, like's been said. So
We don't even know we're there now.
well, I'm just saying, as far as you know that if you're out there in a boat and it becomes a problem, or if it starts getting stirred up, and I don't know, somebody else mentioned that the sediment is, in fact, moving out of there right now, and it's true. Is that whenever that water pond level changes, you stir up sediment, so it's there. I mean, we were asked to address it in terms of dam removal. So I guess I want to just steer it back to that. That was our what we were hired to do. But it's very true that there are other reasons to look at the sediment. There are other reasons you may wish to go after that sediment besides dam removal.
So go back to 150 years of collecting the sediment there. Isn't the city would still have to pay, knowing that it came from other locations?
Well, I didn't say that, no, yeah.
Who has, why can't we get some kind of help from some resource to pay for that $200,000 to at least know that?
Yeah, we looked at just what I guess you'd call the standard typical funding sources for this type of project. But if there's a question where you could, you know, perhaps get other assistance, I mean, that's always out there too. I just, you know, we don't have that information right now.
Okay. One final.
As far as removing sediment, you know, Albion did that over there right along 99 across from the cemetery. And they went up there to the south and they built a great big area. And they just went in with dredges and they pumped it up there and of course the water come back. And I mean, I think that was done 25 or 30 years ago and they basically cleaned up. It was be right on 99, right across from the cemetery.
Yeah.
I remember when it was done. So you can pump that on your 88 acres over there.
Yeah, that's similar what I did in Three Rivers. So, yeah. But the trouble is, we need to find more about what's in that sediment. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Another thought on the sediments. First of all, you need to determine toxicity of sediments, but I think also you need to determine what depth they are. Lower Kalamazoo, there's a lot of toxic materials there because of the cave mills at Kalamazoo. And one of the things down here was to contain the toxic sediments by covering them with another material which would have no vegetation and prevent movement of toxic materials.
Yeah.
So this is the thought.
Well, you're very right. There are lots of options for dealing with the sediment, but when you start talking of not only the volume of sediment, but the square acres that we've got here, the area, the cost just starts adding up. Whether it's capping it or whatever you're doing to handle it or to deal with it is going to start getting expensive.
One thing before, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the depth is important too. Yeah, there can be lenses that are high concentration here and then low concentration there. It's a three-dimensional picture.
Before we go back to Ms. Miller, just because I'll get this on tape, if there's any other questions, anybody who's watching this on YouTube, they should go to Ed Rice. It's erice@citymarshall.com. His office is in this building, the Public Services building. So if there's other questions you have, they should go to Ed. So I wanted to fit that in before we run out of time. So Ms. Miller?
Oh, I wanted to identify exactly where I was on B Drive. If you take the curve at the River Road, you go like 1/8 of a mile on the right. It'd be the first, there's a road that comes up and over the tracks towards the river. I'm right there. And I have city utilities. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to, is there comes some kind of a suction thing where they can suck out sediment and put it into like trucks or whatever, transport?
Oh yes,
We could do it periodically so it doesn't build up.
Well, that's hydraulic dredging, and we had a picture of that on one of our graphics. You know, and again, it's not cheap. And part of the problem is that for every gallon of sediment you suck up, you're going to get 10 gallons, 100 gallons. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's a lot of water. So all these choices are expensive. Yeah, whatever methods out there, they're not going to be cheap.
And I wanted to say, I can't see they're getting dirtier. Everything's getting cleaner, so it can't be any more toxic. It has to be, it's either been there and it's there because what Jerry said about all these plants have been closed. Marshall had one that's the plants used to dump in before the 90s, and they can't do that anymore. But
okay. Jim.
I don't want to argue with Jerry. I waited till he left. Within the last year, I've been in a motorboat all the way from down at the band shelf, Cold Spring Park, Togo Point, Lost Knife Camp, all the way up by motor. So it's not that bad if you know where the channel is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're, I think, going to be, yeah. Okay.
That too, and there's a skier that comes he came for 8 years, he would bring his boat to Stewart's Lake every single day for 8 years and ski up and down the river. And he had a big old motorboat, so
Okay.
it's still
Besides
there.
that, if you drain the dam, where are the airplanes going to land? I love it when the airplanes come in and land on the.
Where's Dave Mead? Okay, well, thank you all. Council thanks you, staff thanks you, and we'll keep you informed.